What's up, guys? Welcome to the first edition of the Sci Fi Bookery. Today, I wanted to talk about one of my all time favorite books from arguably my all time favorite science fiction writer. This is Martians Go Home by Fredric Brown, the classic sci fi comedy, originally published in 1954 for the astonishing science fiction pulp magazine. They used to have these magazines back in it was like science fiction magazines, there were space magazines, there was like westerns, cowboys and stuff, all that kind of thing, but they had all these pulp magazines that you could get, and it was in the 50s, 40s too, and it kind of fizzled out in the 60s. But these were a lot of sci-fi stories were originally published in those magazines in short form, and then this particular one was published in 1954 in astonishing science fiction in short form, and then the full-length book was published in 1955, and this is the original. You see, it's the Bantam 35-cent book. Can you imagine getting these for 35 cents and just having amazing reading experience? That's what I love about vintage books. I mostly read 50s era sci-fi. I find it the most pleasing to me, at least. It's lots of really interesting ideas. Stuff isn't played out just yet. It's everybody has their own unique perspective on things. I do read some modern sci-fi, but I find that more modern sci-fi stories kind of follow a similar format, and it's less and less of them are very original. Whereas back then, I mean, this stuff was absolute gold, and that's what I love about it. Fredric Brown, not particularly popular when you look at his contemporaries like Ray Bradbury or Hal Clement or something like that. But Fredric Brown, to me, stands alone because he has this dry wit about him, which I know is not super uncommon in sci-fi writers, but with him, he was just weird. And like other sci-fi writers, you see the dry wit and they're, smoking the cigarette and talking and making comments. But with Fredric Brown, he was just a really weird guy. And a lot of times that's what makes really good sci-fi writing. So Martians Go Home, 1954, published in 1955. This follows the story of a man named Luke Devereaux, and he's an author, which a lot of authors in the 50s wrote about being authors. It was kind of a meta thing that they did. But anyway, so Luke Devereaux, he is an author. He's trying to finish a book, so he goes out into isolation to his friend's cabin, or they call it a shack. It's out in the middle of the desert in California, and he's dead set on finishing this book, but he's having a lot of problems. He's got writer's block, and he just can't get anything else out to get it completed. So he starts drinking, and he's drinking a lot. And then there's a knock on the door, and he goes to answer the door, and it says Little Green Martian. And it's funny because this was kind of like the era where space exploration became more attainable. And I think that because of that, a lot of this stuff seemed so much more far-fetched because people are like, there's probably no, aliens on Mars. There's no Martians. But stuff like this still came out. And this particular one is so on the nose with the Martians that it's funny. So instead of having an Earth invasion where the Martians are here to enslave humans and take over the Earth and terraform it and destroy everything and change the atmosphere and all that stuff, in this particular one, the Martians come just to be annoying. And it's absolutely hilarious. There's laughs around every corner in this thing. The Martians are so funny. They swear a lot. They make fun of everybody. And probably one of the coolest things is that they never tell a lie. So the book continues. Within the first few pages, Luke finds out that it wasn't just him. It's not just an isolated incident, but the Martians have taken over the planet. And they can do what's called quimming. So they can quim to different places, which just means they travel, like they just pop up out of nowhere. Bloom, bloom. So their main goal, they won't tell people why they're here, but you learn just by seeing what's happening. Their main goal is just to disrupt human life. So we don't know why they were here, but we know that they're here to disrupt. So you can imagine how annoying that would be if you're just driving a car and a Martian just quims up next to you, hey bub, and you just run into something, and it happens throughout the book. So it follows Luke Devereaux's story as the main character in the book, but it's sort of an ensemble cast because it breaks off to tell stories of different people and the way that they are handling the Martians. And because of that, it's so interesting, and it's an easy read because it jumps around a lot. It's very short segments. So it's written as, it's almost a collection of short stories. And then Luke's story jumps up in between all of them, which was not uncommon with this sort of third person omniscient narrator. And I like it. I really like it. And Fredric Brown brings that into a great perspective because he writes each character differently. He comes at them differently. So like Luke, he's writing from an almost like, he has no pity for Luke. Luke is just getting into stuff. He kind of like causes his own problems. But then we shoot over to Luke's ex-wife, and the narrator comes at her with a little more compassion, because you'll learn Luke is a bit of a handful. She's a nurse, so like the doctor that she works for, the narrator comes at him with a different perspective. But then when it breaks out into people outside of Luke's life, people he doesn't know, each one of them is handled differently. And I think that's the hallmark, the telling of the genius of Fredric Brown, is because with each one of these characters, he's not just developing the character, he's developing the narrator's relationship to the character. So that makes it all the more interesting, and it tells the story in such a unique way because rather than getting everyone's perspective on the story, you're getting the narrator's perspective on each person. And it's a really cool, very, very meta kind of way to describe that, because the narrator never gives their own opinion of anything, never gives their own way of thinking. It's always through someone else. And what's funny about it is he never talks about the aliens, the Martians, as if they're a character in the story. They're always sort of a sub-character to whatever else is going on, which it makes the story more rich and deeper, because you're learning that like these people are doing regular life things, but they also have to deal with the Martians. And I think that was a cool way to portray that. But this book, I love it. It is one of my I would say top 5 favorite books of all time. I would say probably it's my favorite sci-fi book of all time. It's funny, it's unique, it's heartwarming at times, it's got redemption stories, it's got heroism, it's got it all, and it is written in beautiful 1955, we hope so much for the future kind of a way. And I love that about the 50s sci-fi writing. So there it is. There's our first edition of the Sci Fi Bookery here on YouTube. And this is Martians Go Home by Fredric Brown. We'll see you in the next episode.